Good evening. This is the analysis of the film Native Son, which is an adaptation from the book Native Son, written by Richard Wright. This is Richard Wright's biography. He was born on September 4th, 1908, in Roxie, Mississippi. Between 1914 and 1920, he grew up in extreme poverty. His grandparents had been slaves. He was shifted from one relative to another. Between 1921 and 1931, he worked in a number of unskilled jobs and got an opportunity to write through the Federal Writers Project. Then in 1932 he became a member of the Communist Party, and in 1938, after he had been a Harvard editor of the Communist Daily Worker, he wrote Uncle Tom's Children, which is a volume of novels based on the question, how may a black man live in a country that denies his humanity? In 1940, he wrote the bestseller Native Son, which is a protest to white treatment of blacks. In 1941, this novel was played in Broadway. In 1945, he published his autobiography called Black Boy, which is considered one of his finest works because of his novelistic techniques. This autobiography chronicles the extreme poverty of his childhood and his experience of white prejudice and violence against black people. Between 1953 and 1957, he settled in Paris as a permanent expatriate. He wrote The Outsider, acclaimed as the first American existential novel. And in 1957, he wrote a series of lectures given in Europe called White Man Listen. He died in 1960 in Paris, but between 1961 and 2008, a different number of unpublished or unexpurgated versions of his works were published. Summary of the film. This is a film about an African-American young man who lives with his family in a small popular black community in Chicago. He cherished his girlfriend, who also lives in the same community. He also cherished his deaf father. He even carries a gun with him, which was owned by his father. He has a low-paying job as a bike messenger, and he dreams of a different kind of life, but he is aware of the prejudices about his skin color. He thought his life would change when he was offered the job as the driver of an important, wealthy white businessman and his family, but instead he accidentally ends up killing the man's daughter, and he tries to cover his actions as he's convinced that nobody would believe it had been an accident. Well, because of his skin color. He's absolutely sure that people would judge him for his skin color. But his effort is in vain. He is soon blamed for the death of the young woman, just as he thought. He tries to run away with his girlfriend. He tries to convince her. And although she was going to at first, she realizes it is not a good idea. She's a good girl, she goes to college, she doesn't really want to do that. So she tries to make him come to his senses so that he turns himself in. But he doesn't want to do that. So she leaves him in their hiding place and they say goodbye. Just as his girlfriend is leaving their hiding place, the police has already found them, so they are surrounding the area. She goes away, and he gets himself killed by the police. Well, he knew he had no intention of killing the girl, but he also knew that nobody would believe him apart from his family. because he was black. Now I'd like to talk about the setting of the film. This film recreates segregation of black communities in Chicago. The main character is influenced by racism and black oppression. He can't fulfill his dreams of being a pilot because of his skin color that is not allowed for black people. So he's frustrated about it. And although he's innocent about the crime he committed, he knows that nobody would believe him just because of his skin color, which is the characteristic of the film and is what the film wants to show. He has a friend who tries to get him into the robbery in a neighborhood shop, but he doesn't really want to be stereotyped. Poverty and lack of opportunities are characteristic in the film too, and that's what the writer wanted to show with the life of this young boy. And there is a contrast between the black world and high society that is represented by the affluent family Daltons, for which he is a driver, and Bigger's poor family. Now let's analyze the characters of the film. The main character is Bigger Thomas. He's a resented black young who wishes to become a professional and have a better life. He really wishes to have a white people lifestyle according to his way of thinking and what society has taught him. And although he seems lost, he still tries to make something of his life because he knows it is the only way to prove society wrong about black people. But unfortunately, things go absolutely wrong. He gets the job as a driver for this wealthy family, but he commits an unintentional crime for which he's judged according to the prejudice towards black people. Mary Dalton is Mr. Dalton's daughter. She's considered a good girl by her parents, but she really is a party girl, and she's involved in a group of young people, including her boyfriend, who have political interests and ideals that agree with communism. One night she gets drunk and she's very intoxicated, and as Big tries to hide it from her blind mom, he ends up suffocating her with a pillow, but she has no intention of doing so. Mr. Dalton, although he's a wealthy man, he does not totally represent white people of the time, since he trusts Bigger from the beginning and lets him know about it. He lets him know about it, for example, when the police come to their house looking for Mary, and they want to take him back to the station to be interviewed, but he doesn't let them. He and his blind wife think too much of their daughter and trust she is studying hard. Bessie. She's Bigger's girlfriend. She's in love with him and expects a lot from him, although deep in her heart she is not convinced of having a good future if she stays. She goes to college and she works. She tries to convince him of turning himself in after she finds out that he committed the crime. He doesn't explain how it happened, but she can't convince him, so she goes away. Bigger's friends. Well, he has two friends with whom he hangs out very often. One of them is trying to convince them to rob a shop in the neighborhood. He has everything planned. He tells them about it, but Big refuses because he does not want to be stereotyped as a black man. Well, that was the stereotype there was at the time, because the black people were seen as delinquents or thieves at that time. And Jan is Mary's boyfriend. He's the leader of the young group with communist ideas. At first, Big tries to make it look as if he had something to do with Mary's disappearance. But then police find out that that's not true.
Native some symbols. The rat. This animal gives a first impression that makes clear that Bigger Thomas' family is poor and lives in a bad place. The jacket, during the development of the film, seems to give a message of who is really Bigger, but after the murder the jacket gives a message a little confused apparently of what could be in the mind of Bigger for that time. The green hair, the rings, the music, several things in his outfit show that Bigger is not the typical Afro-American boy. The gun maybe shows the bad side of Bigger, that Bigger that wants to shoot to make everything different around him. The restaurant is something like a test, as it shows Bigger in front of his friend as the employee of the white people. Mr. Green is the voice in his mind saying, "Do not spoil it." Supported quotations. What is Bigger thinking on the movie is some situation is deep. In the movie, someone always appears to remember that it is a history between black and white people. Connection with the literary period and its characteristics. The film shows how Bigger wants to be someone more than just a black boy. He wants to go beyond that everyone and everything believes about what Bigger can get.